Welcome to Lily High on Life. And today we have a truly special guest, Mr. Warren Mundine AO. Warren, welcome to Lily High on Life.
Oh, thank you very much. That sounds great. Nothing like it having a bit of positivity, high on life.
And, you know, Warren, you are such an extraordinary man. I'm going to tell the audience why in just a moment. But you're not on the show because of how fabulous and extraordinary you are. You're actually on the show because you are the epitome of Lily High on Life. You're somebody that when they're not happy with the direction their life is going, will find a way to change that.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a pretty simple person, you know. I don't try and make things complex. I try and break it down into parts and work from there. But it's but if I run into a brick wall, then I work about how I get around that brick wall or whatever. Yeah.
Now, you do have an Order of Australia. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was actually surprised.
Don't know why. You're also an extraordinary businessman, and so we'd like to hear a little bit more about your businesses. And you are also, my personal favourite, the Chairman of CPAC, which I just attended this last weekend, the Conservative Public Action Committee. And as though that were not enough, you were actually a Labor Member of Parliament and then a almost Liberal Member of Parliament, from one extreme to the other. And on top of all of that, and I say this carefully because you're also Aboriginal. You're one of our exalted species of citizenship in Australia. And I love the fact that you don't think that matters, in a sense.
In itself, no, it doesn't. I'm very proud Aboriginal. I'm of the Bundjalung, Gumbaynggirr and Yuin people of the east coast of New South Wales. Gumbaynggirr and Bundjalung in the north coast, and the Yuin on the south coast. But I'm very proud of the fact that I have also Irish blood, which probably explains my drinking habit. But there's an Irish bloke come out, Donovan, and he married a Aboriginal woman on the south coast back in the 1870s, 1860s, and
wow!
And from my mother's side of the family, that's where they're descended from.
Have you been to Ireland?
Yes, I have actually. I was doing some business in London and that, and we had a bit of spare time, so we jumped on the famous Ryan Air flight and went across to Dublin, and then went down to the south coast of Ireland, down to Cork, County Cork, because that's where my great-great-grandfather come from, in that West Cork area. Yeah.
And were there any relatives still there that you were able to connect with?
Well, it was quite funny because when Irish people are different, but you could only have one spot of blood of Irish in you, but you're Irish. And I'll give you a funny story. When I got elected president of the Australian Labor Party, the headline in Ireland was Irish man elected president of the Australian Labor Party. So I still got the paper here at home. And it was great. It was great catching up with people, hearing the stories. I think half of them were pretty untrue, but anyway, it was good fun to sit around with a few ales and listen and chat and get on it. Yeah.
You didn't pick up an Irish accent?
No, I didn't. I didn't at all. Unfortunately, yeah.
Warren,
but I did hear a funny story about it. The Donovans, of course, or we call them Donovans, they call them Donovans over there, is that we picked the wrong side in William of Orange versus Bonnie Prince Charles, and they took our land off us. So I said, gee, I'm a two-time loser. They took it off here and they took it off there.
That's a great story. I've got no Irish blood. I've never been to Ireland, and yet I can still put on an Irish accent at the drop of a hat. And I'm not that good at accents. I just don't know where it comes from. Touch of the bone.
Well, you know, the Irish have been everywhere, so you don't know.
Warren, tell us a little bit about the businesses you're in, because you've created those. You've really created your own businesses from the ground up, and they say this is a difficult thing to do, but you don't seem to consider anything overly difficult.
Well, you know, I found out early in my life that I was a very bad employee, and so I had to find my own job because I always wanted to do my own thing, and so that frustrates people when they're in large corporations, and so you know, I spent my time, you know, in a factory, you know, as a fitter and turner on the floor of a factory, Delta Engineering in Silverwater, and then I went on to the Sydney Water Board and worked there doing pumping stations, water stations, and sewage stations, and sewer lines. And then I went from there to got into the taxation office for a while, and then I went off to the South Australian Institute of Technology, which is now the South Australian University. And I was thinking, gee, I'm going to, you know, what am I going to do? And then people just kept on throwing jobs at me, so that was fun. And then I realised around 2013, 2012, I thought, no, I can't do this anymore. I've got to do my own thing. And so that's when I left and set up my own businesses, yeah.
Warren, how do you go from fitter and turner into the taxation office? I mean, you're talking about a very hands-on type of profession, and then you go to a desk and become a numbers man?
Yes, I was always looking for experiences and think, you know, learning stuff. I was always about learning. In fact, I'm a great believer that if you're not learning anything, go see a doctor because you might be dead. So I was very, very much into that. So, look, I always saw myself going somewhere and doing something, and not being trapped into a certain profession, a certain life. I always knew that I wanted something. You know, I was always hungry for things, and that's what made me, you know, drove me along that line. And I had a great time as a fitter and turner. In fact, this kid, I give talks to high school kids, and this year 10 kid asked me this question. He says, "So what was your plan? You know, you're this young 16-year-old kid in a factory, and what was your plan to get to where you wanted to go? You know, like President of the Labor Party." And my answer was, I never thought about it really. I said, that's the first time I got asked that question, and then I started thinking about it, and I said, well, you know, if I told my parents at 16 that I had this plan to become president of the Australian Labor Party, they probably would have put me in a mental institution. But I was just hungry for knowledge and hungry for things. So I'd look and I'd see a hill, and I think, you know, what's that view look like there? And then I go to that hill, and then I see another hill that's got something broken, and I'll go over there and say, I can fix that. And then all of a sudden, here I am.
And Warren, you were one of 11 children, is that correct?
Yeah, I was 9. I was number 9 of 11 children, 8 boys and 3 girls. The girls, in fact, I'm working on a book about my sisters. They, you know, like around 1960, 1959, 1960, because I come from a large family. I'm number 9, so I had older siblings, 20 years, 18, 17 and 15 years older than me. And so they were going into the banking world. Now, it's just an amazing story. My sister Anne, that she went into banks, worked for the Rural Bank in New South Wales, then went on to Toronto, Canada, and then on to Zurich in Switzerland. And then, unfortunately, she contracted cancer and passed away. But the idea of a woman, let alone an Aboriginal woman, working in a bank in the 1960s is quite incredible to think about.
Absolutely.
And then my other sister, Olive, she was the second oldest girl. She was working in a bank too. She went to the Royal Bank in New South Wales, and then she was discovered by David Jones. They were looking for something that said something about Australia and a model, and then she was modelling for David Jones. In fact,
wow.
And then she, on the 170th anniversary of David Jones, they had an exhibition of her, which made us really proud. She was on This Day Tonight and all the newspapers and stuff, and then it was Maggie Eckhart and Maggie Tabler and all those. So she was modelling with them, and so that was amazing. Then she went and become a school teacher and was teaching out at Mount Druitt, kids, and that's because that was a passion of education for young kids. And she went out in a very tough area in those days, Mount Druitt. I believe it still is tough today, but she went out there and had a great time. Yeah.
We'll look forward to that book coming out. It sounds like it's going to be really, really interesting. But Warren, I know you don't know what it's like to be an only child, but being number 9 of 11, was there a lot of interaction? Was there a lot of talk? Were your brothers and sisters like you in their outlook and in their seeing themselves as reaching high places? How did you fit in that family dynamic?
Well, of course, I was the most good-looking and intelligent of all my brothers and sisters. Obviously. You were never lonely. Let's put it that way. You were never lonely. And it was a great experience because I had an older brother who's 20 years older than me. He served he went on 2 tours of Vietnam. He was a regular soldier. He was in a Confrontase in the mid-60s when Indonesia invaded Malaysia. He was in Borneo in the Malaysian Peninsula. He was there with the communist uprising in Malaysia. And he travelled the world. He was at West Point. He was with the Welsh Guards at Buckingham Palace and so on. And he had this amazing, incredible person. And, most people, when they got an older brother who's been very successful in that,
right.
And Mum's always talking about me. Why aren't you like Roy and all that? Well, we didn't get really angry about that stuff. We were just so proud of each other and of our older brother that was great. It's really good. John, my brother John, is the third oldest boy. He that's spelled D-J-O-N. He was the first of the family to go to university in that. And he went off and did an economics degree at Macquarie University. Then he went on to, after about 5 years, he was working in the corporate world in Sydney. He quit and he went bush and went up into Northeast Arnhem and started painting.
Oh, my God.
Which was a shock and horror of my parents. I said, oh, my God, we got him to go to university. And he was in the corporate world and all of a sudden he goes and runs off to Northeast Ireland. Well, for us younger kids, we always knew he was going to do that because when you go to my parents' house today, there's a concrete garage, and when you go into the garage, it's just artwork all around it. And he painted that wall, and he painted the doors, and he did everything while he was growing up. So we always knew he was going to get into art, but it was a bit of a shock for Mum and Dad. But after he became one of Australia's leading curators of Aboriginal art, he worked for Donald Trump years ago, buying Aboriginal art from them, the Homes of Court and all people like that. So
you can't just skip over that story. How did he work for Donald Trump in the States? An Aboriginal boy from Melbourne, from Sydney.
He became world renowned about setting up art exhibitions and Aboriginal art and stuff like that. and he was at the Imperial Museum in England and the Primitive Museum in Frankfurt and Osaka and other places, travelling the world. And of course, he got a reputation, and that's how he got rung up one day and said, "Come to New York, and I want to, purchase Aboriginal art." So and that's what he did.
And so he was working for Donald Trump as an art advisor?
An art advisor and purchaser, yeah.
Awesome. Love that. But when you were growing up, it was a pretty full house. And would you say that you were living still typically as one would imagine Aboriginals were living back in those days were you in a proper house? Were you in a humpy? Were your parents in a humpy? Just what was that like?
Yeah, well, my father, he come out of Bayugal. He was born in Bayugal, which is about 80 kilometres northwest up the Clarence River from Grafton in New South Wales. That's where the Mundine family come from.
Right.
And that's where we worked, and the family worked on cattle stations and that out there, and my father, he did live in a humpy, and my grandparents, great-grandparents, it's amazing when I was writing my book, if you go out to cattle stations where my family worked and you see it's been in the family for a while, that cattle station, and that they have incredible archives, and we come across photos of my great-grandparents and family members. And one of my pride is on my computer as a screensaver. I have a photo of my dad around 1919, in my grandfather's carrying him as a baby.
Wow.
And it looks like a big family gathering, because in the photos there's about 20 Aboriginal people who are relatives of my grandparents and that, yeah.
Amazing memories to have and hold on to. And your dad was pretty strict with you, from what I gather.
Oh, he wasn't strict with me because I was a perfect child. He was strict with my brothers and sisters. No, he was a very old-fashioned man, a man of his times. You can imagine a person who survived through the Spanish flu era, and both my parents did, and through the Great Depression, and then through the Second World War and post-Second World War. He was an amazing person, but at the same time he was a very proud man. He was about 6'3". He had his straight back, always looked in your eye, and demanded that you had good manners, good morals, and you worked. As a young child, because we're from a poor family. We used to go down to sawmills and collect wood and go out in the paddocks and collect cow manure and horse manure, and then take it into graft and then sell it to people to put in their gardens and their fireplaces and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I even have a photo. I think I'm about 6, and I'm standing at this sawmill with this wood. And that. So he was a bloke who always worked, very disciplined. He used to get up at 5 a.m. every morning to go to work, and he did that right up to his death. And that's how we knew he died, because my brother went down to the newsagent, because the first thing you do is get up 5 a.m, have a shave, clean his teeth, put some water under his arms and clean himself up a bit, and then he'd go down to the newsagents and collect his papers. And my brother went down to the newsagent, and the newsagent said, "Oh, where's your father?" And he said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We didn't come in to get his papers today." And so then my brother went around the house, and that's where he found him laying up in bed.
Oh, God.
Dead. What a way to go. Yeah. And he was in 92, and he was still mowing the lawn, still washing clothes, still cooking foods, a very independent man.
And what do you remember of your mother from your early years and her relationship with your father?
Well, just to finish on my dad always had a little saying. If we asked him about Mr. Johnson down the road or something like that, he only had two ways of talking about people. He'd say, Mr. Johnson's a worker, and that meant that they got up every day and went to work and fed their families and looked after their families. Or he'd say, Mr. Johnson is not a worker. And that would have the connotation that they didn't get up to go to work and they didn't feed their families and didn't look after people. Right. And so he was very strict and moral about that stuff. And of course, Mum and Dad just always herd us up on Sunday morning, and we weren't allowed to have breakfast until we went to Mass. And same with Christmas. We weren't allowed to open our Christmas presents until we went to Mass and stuff like that. We went to Catholic schools. So they were very, very strong about who they are and very high and respect people. Yeah.
Right. And their relationship there with each other, with all you kids around, did you see much of a personal relationship between them, or was it mainly managing life and you kids?
Well, when you got a lot of kids around, you don't have much time for each other. I presume my parents never had sex. It was,
yes,
a thought that's never got into my head, and I don't want it. But they had 11 kids, but it was about us. We were the centre of their attention all the time, and they made sure we were up early in the morning, and we did our chores and did our work before we went to school, and we all went to school, and then they made sure we come home straight home from school and did our chores again, and that because everyone had to do things in the house.
Yep.
And I remember sometimes, a couple of times, my brothers and I were jumping up and down the bed in the pro, so she made us carry the bed down to the local blacksmith and get it fixed, and then we had to carry it all the way back. But she was strict about her, especially with the boys. That the boys had to learn everything. So we learnt to sew and we learnt to iron. And,
wow, very impressive.
We learnt to wash after dinner. And I remember I got a good kick up the bum once when we were ordered to wash up the plates and everything after dinner, and I said, why should us boys do it? Shouldn't the girls do it because they need to learn how to do it for their husbands? Anyway, she went off ahead of me there. My ears are still ringing 50 years later. But so they wanted us to be self-sufficient. Do things. Dad used to sit us out afternoon after school when he'd come home from work, and we'd sit around the back of the house polishing our shoes. We used to do spit and polish. That's the way he always wanted it. I still do it today. I'm sort of got it beaten into me. But anyway, but it also gave us a time together because, he was always working. So we're sitting around, and while you're polishing shoes, you're talking. And so that was our sort of little chit-chat time with all us boys and that. And, so it was good.
So, Warren, I have to ask you, I was going to wait till later, but when you describe this very structured, very moralistic, very do the right thing life, how on earth did you come to be fired from SBS for tweeting profanity?
No, that wasn't the reason I left. The reason I left was because I was...
You said things on a tweet.
I shouldn't have said. I had to apologise. I shouldn't have said what I said, but I was right in outing the person because they were a journalist.
I have no doubt. I agree with. By the way, I agree with absolutely everything I've heard you say so far. So I have no doubt.
So I shouldn't have said what I said. So I apologise and we moved on. He was very gracious about it, and I was, but I reminded him that he shouldn't go out and put out people's private mobile numbers to run a political campaign. A journalist shouldn't do that.
Of course.
And of course I got in a lot of trouble. It was a lot of fun. I was even mentioned in Parliament. So, yeah.
These things happen. So let me just go back there a little bit as well. You are now on your third marriage, I believe?
Yeah, that's right.
What did you learn? How did you tell me about how you got married the first time, how you jumped into it, and then what you've learned as you've gone through? Because there are no mistakes.
Look, what I've learned a lot actually. If you want to be a very wealthy man, don't get divorced. That was the first lesson. When I was a very young boy, I was 17, 18, and I always saw myself, because of my Aboriginal and Catholic upbringing, that I would marry about 24 and go on and work hard and do things. But by that time I would have finished my trade and been out working and been able to buy a house and that. What happened is I broke one of the golden rules, which is pretty common with young boys back in those days, the 70s, early 70s. Uh-huh. And when I met this woman and we got on quite well, I didn't hold back, and of course she got pregnant, and then so I all shot it off on the first go. I think that's the word, and I ended up. She was pregnant, and so I did. I thought it was my duty because for her and for the baby, and we married. I look back now and I think we were too young, and we. Look, it just wasn't meant to be, and but we worked for 7 years and tried it, and it just didn't work out. That was one of the things that motivated me then to go to the state and start to improve my life and go up the ladder and stuff like that. My second wife, I met her through my sister, and I haven't spoken to my sister since. No. She was an Aboriginal person and a very well-respected woman. She went through teachers' college and taught at Moree in high school and taught in Dubbo primary schools, and she was eventually could become a manager of a TAFE college at Western New South Wales, and she's a professor now at Sydney University. Really highly intelligent and incredible person. To be honest, that was the love of my life. It was, we built a life together. We had 4 children of our own, plus 2 children from the first marriage, because I ended up with the children, and we had 6 children in the house, and then we fostered a couple of kids as well, because this friend of ours come to the house working for community services and that, who she said we got this Aboriginal girl who had been sexually abused as a young child, 6, 7 years old, and the foster father who was looking after him went to jail, and the mother went back to Holland. She came from Holland, so they needed someone to look after him. And I remember saying to them, look, we're not on the list, but they kept on saying, yeah, but we thought you'd be good. You and Lynette was my second wife's name. And I said, no, we can't do it because I don't think I could handle a child who's been sexually abused. But the problem was, this is where I made my mistake, living in Armidale, and that they said, a good restaurant or something we could go out to and have a feed, because, we are staying overnight in Armidale, and we'll take the child back. And I said, don't be stupid. You can have dinner here. We'll cook dinner for you. And of course she never left then. Once we met her, that was it. She's given us 3 beautiful grandchildren, and we love her just as much as our own flesh and blood. And it was great.
Great story. Even you can be wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
Not
sometimes.
often. Not often.
I don't know.
And you didn't have 9 yet, so you're working your way up. So all good.
Yeah, and it was good because from a very young age, my earliest memories, I always wanted to have a family and I wanted to have children, and I always wanted to be better than my father. Because he was a lovely man, a beautiful man, and that. But he's old-fashioned in that he just worked. He told me once he wasn't my friend, but he was my father, and his job was to make sure that there's food on the table, there's a roof over our head, we got a good education, and we were able to then build ourselves a career. And that's what he saw his job as, yeah.
And most of you did that. I've got to ask you, because even when there are 2 or 3 kids in a family, let alone 11, do you all talk to each other? Are there any major blues to the stage where people actually stop talking, or are you able to resolve amongst yourselves?
I tell you what, it'll probably shock people when I'm about to say, when we were young kids, we were just boys in the country, and we used to do mad things, climb trees, fall out of them, break arms. I remember my 2 brothers just immediately older than me, they come to me and said, we wanted to play cowboys and Indians. And I said, that's a good game, I'll play with you. So the next minute they tied me up. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, you're a horse thief. We don't like horse thieves. And so then they chucked a rope around me and threw me out and tried to hoist me up a tree. And I'll never forget my father's face as he stepped out the back door. And here I was just about to be swinging off this tree, being hung for being a horse thief. And he just... I never seen him move so fast in all my life. He sort of dropped the paper, sprinted, about 20 metres, and smacked my brothers, cut me down, and made sure I was over it all okay, and then smacked my brothers again.
I'm sorry for laughing, but that is hilarious. Did they really not realise that you could die?
I don't know. I think they just wanted to kill me because I was my parents' favourite child. But anyway, but this is how slow I am. I remember about a month later, they come to me again and said, would you like to play Cowboys and Indians? And I said, yeah, sure. Not learning from my first experience. And anyway, then they said, well, you're the cowgirl. And I thought, I'm not a cowgirl. And I said, yes, you are. We need a cowgirl in this game, and you're it. And I said, I'm not going to be a cowgirl. So I climbed up on the rocking horse we had there. And the next thing I remember, because Peter, I remember with my brother Peter, he hit the rocking horse and I fell off it, and I fell down and busted my jaw. And next thing I remember, I'm waking up in hospital. So we had a lot of fun. But my poor mother, I don't know how she put up with it. I remember once, because we didn't have a pool, we used to get a hose and put it in a circle in the backyard, and then my brother John would sit on his back and we'd sit on his feet, and he was like a springboard, and he'd kick us into the air, and we'd do this somersault and then land in this imaginary pool. And Mum, because she come outside, she looked and said, I bet you one of you boys are going to break some bones. And within 5 minutes, my brother Philip, he was kicked in the air, landed on his arm, and you heard this crack.
Wow.
And he got up and he's walking away because he knew he was going to be in trouble with Mum, so he was trying to hide his broken arm.
Absolutely hilarious.
And he looked at it. Mum just sat there and looked at him and said, I told you so.
Did you get hauled off to the doctor or the hospital? Or
Yeah. We used to. She was forever, because we didn't have a car, so she was always marching us all down to the hospital all the time. I think every couple of weeks, one of us was being marched off to the hospital to get stitches or fix broken bones or or magpie attacks, or whatever.
Whatever. So actually, Warren, my original question about this actually referred to, or was referring to arguments or things that would upset you enough emotionally that you would stop talking to each other, things that happen when you're older. They say that most of the major things are to do with money, that people get upset with each other and stop talking to each other, but there are other slights of your being and your emotions that also cause really big rifts within families. Or is that just something that never really touched you guys?
We were taught not to argue about money. You had to earn your money, and no matter if you earned $30 a week, which I did in one of my jobs, or you earned thousands of dollars a week. Money, which is what my sister did, in the banking world. It was and that it was about work. We were taught that work was a virtue, and it was a great honour to have a job and to work and earn money. And so we never asked each other for money. Even if we had, the holes in our pants or whatever, or we were struggling or anything like that, we never asked each other for money.
And you never even said, and you never said things to each other or judged each other in a way. Yeah.
No, we did. We used to make fun of each other, some of the silly things we did, but that was in joking, and we'd all have a laugh and stuff like that.
But that's one of the wonderful things about that, because I realised as you were answering me that you weren't trying to avoid my question. You really didn't understand even what I meant. And I say that with great joy and wonder, because what you don't really understand is today's wokeness, because it's all about feelings being hurt so badly that you can't even talk to someone else.
I find that strange. I do, and I find it sort of outside of my life, really. That's not to say that people. And I've seen it with families and friends, people who don't talk to each other for 20 years or something.
Yes.
In fact, I know a bloke I worked with, he never spoke to his father from the age of 18 until his father died. Mm-hmm. And I every weekend, when I was living in Sydney, and my parents are still living in Sydney, we used to go to the house every weekend.
Yeah.
Everyone come to the house. It was sort of like we hadn't left. And we just brought an extra tribe along, and it was all these kids.
Such a wonderful thing that I wish more people could experience.
Yeah, and we always were taught that because we had a kinship structure as well, an Aboriginal kinship structure. So my cousins were not cousins; they were brothers and sisters.
Yes,
and that's how we treated each other. And my aunties and uncles were my parents, really, and they taught me things and stuff. And we all got on quite well. We had our arguments and punch ups and stuff like that. But it was never meant. It was never meant to.
It was never taken personally enough.
Never taken. And we were taught to also respect other people, and stuff, because all the neighbours. In fact, I can't remember. I can't even know the first name of my neighbours. We used to call them Mrs. Williams or Mr. Williams, and Mr. Smeraldo and Mrs. Smeraldo, and all that type. So that's what we did all the time. We. In fact, 6 years ago, I went to a funeral of a friend I've known since kindergarten, and it was the first time I learned his mother's because it was his mother's funeral, and it was the first time I actually heard her first name.
Wow.
That's 60 years and I never knew what her first name was.
Yeah, and you're not really that old. I mean, for you to have these values. So let me ask you also about, you have... When I talk about people making decisions to change their lives, normally it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can just be a little thing that suddenly clicks, and so you go in a new direction. But you are amazing. I mean, to go from being not just a member of the Labor Party, but the head of the Labor Party, to then being part of the Liberal Party. What goes through your mind? What has to happen for that huge a change to happen within you?
It wasn't a hard thing. It may surprise, but I remember, it was 2012, and the Senate position became vacant, and I went and spoke to headquarters about it and stuff like that. And look, politics is a tough game. It's a really tough, dirty game. It's worse than a riot at a football match. It's
yes.
Everyone's fighting for positions and things, and in fact, there's always you have a better relationship with your enemy across the other side of the aisle than you have with some people in your own party, because they're just out to get your job and and that. To me, it wasn't very hard. I just sort of I was a bit over all that stuff. And I remember they sent me the paperwork to renew my membership. And I said to my wife, I said, I just got my membership renewal. I said, what should I do? And she said, that's up to you. If you're happy, then do it. And if you're not happy, then don't. And it was really funny. It wasn't that I wasn't happy. It's just I didn't see it as that important anymore. And,
I love that.
And so I didn't. Resign it, and so I sort of slipped out of the political area, and I sort of did, and I sort of didn't, even though I wasn't in a political party or anything like that. After the 21st, so within a year and a half, after the 2013 election, where the Abbott Liberal coalition government come to power, he rang me up and said, "Look, I want to offer you a job." And I said, "I've got a job, I don't really need a job." And he said, "I want you to chair the Prime Minister's Indigenous Advisory Council." And I was thinking, all right, this is not going to be fun. So I said, "Look, I'm not really interested." So he said, "No, I really want you to do it. I've read your articles, I've read what you've written, I heard you speak, and I thought you have a lot of common sense, and I really want to shake this area up. I don't want to be one of the Prime Ministers that leaves and says, I wish I'd done more." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll do it, but I'll do it on my terms." And he said, "Okay, what's your terms?" So then we had for the next 4 weeks, I hope they destroyed the emails, but we're sending each other emails about what we should be doing, how we should be doing it, and then we agreed. And the agreement sort of was that I wanted a small group of people to work with, 6 or 7. I had to accept that I had 12 because that's what he wanted, because you had to, in a federation, they've got to have people from each state, and they've got to have people from all, different genders and everything. So I had to accept that, but he had to accept that we were going to do everything with an economic outcome. So even if it was health, if it was education or whatever, we had to get an economic outcome out of it. So that was about having healthy workers, healthy kids, looking up, making sure that women got good health, so they have healthy babies, which then can go to school, etc., etc., etc. Because I become very focused on. I don't know any people in the world who ever got out of poverty without an economy without creating businesses and jobs and education and employment were the two big things we focused on. Yeah.
So you really slid quite comfortably into the Liberal Party.
Yes, well, I didn't join the Liberal Party 7 years later, but I did align with that philosophy of, because it was drummed into me since I was a kid, about work being a virtue, about getting out there with your hands dirty and taking responsibility for your life and taking responsibility for your own experiences, good, bad and indifferent. And I had a sort of a fighter philosophy, because life is not perfect. I think one Prime Minister said life was never meant to be easy, Malcolm Fraser, and my parents were the same. They said the same things. You'll get knocked down, but you've got to get up. The thing is, you've got to have the fortitude and strength to get up and keep going. And that's what I did when I took the position up the Prime Minister. It was a tough job. Anything we did, you were murdered, really, because we were doing things differently. We took 115 Aboriginal programs and turned them into 5, and people said, well, you just destroyed 145 programs. And we said, no, we didn't. What we did was we got them together, and this is where my business kicked in, that we could shape them to have better outcomes, because we were focusing on outcomes rather than just putting programs up there and processes. We said we want outcomes. And
what a concept.
So that was, I didn't think it was revolutionary until people started throwing rocks at us, but it was there. But I don't care. I had 7 brothers throwing rocks at me and chasing me with picks and shovels when we got into fights. So that they didn't worry me too much. It was, and so that's what we did. We just kept on ploughing ahead through that area, and simple things, like children's attendance at school. We wanted to know the data. I couldn't believe that we couldn't get data, because how can you make decisions with that information? And so we just wanted to get, if there's 100 kids in a community and 50 kids go to school on Monday and 50 kids go to school on Tuesday, are they the same kids?
Yeah, and they're still talking about that today. There was somebody last night talking about that very same, you'd think, simple data. Your position, because we're running out of time, but your position on The Voice is just such a breath of fresh air. As an Aboriginal, you're saying, and I'll let you say it.
Well, it's very simple. What I'm saying is that, first of all, it's not our culture. Aboriginal people don't talk about other people's country. We don't, because it's not our country. That's their spiritual and thousands of years of life. That's their country. They can only talk for their country. I can only talk with my family and extended family about our country, and we can't tell each other. We can prosecute a case about what they should be doing, but at the end of the day, they make their decisions. It's their decisions, and we must respect that.
And the bottom line being, we are all Australians, whether we're Indigenous to the country,
correct,
or whether we've come here for other countries or been born here.
Well, I had the pleasure of going to school. I had 36 kids in my class, and I think I had 36 nationalities, and it was amazing. And it also opened the world up to me. There was a kid in our class who he came up to me and he said, "I heard you're Aboriginal, and this is a kindergarten thing." And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Where do you come from?" And he said, "I'm Estonian." And I said, "Look, I may be a dumb black fella from the bush, but there's no such place as Estonia." And he said, he's a very smart kid. He took me to the library and sat down and opened the atlas up, and there it was, Estonia. And then all of a sudden we started a conversation. Estonia. What's it like being Estonian, and what food do you eat, and what language do you speak? And he said, Estonian. And it just opened my eyes to the world. And so having those conversations. So, we have great people in this country. I think we've got the greatest country in the world. Of course we're not perfect. We've got human beings. Human beings aren't perfect. We're never meant to be perfect. But we try. I always, I don't judge a country by its past. Because every country in the world had a bad beginning and dreadful things have been done in every country in the world. I judge a country by how they've confronted those issues and built a future for everyone. And I think, Australia's done a great job in that. And I'm very proud of Australia for that.
Absolutely. And just like, my mind boggled with the Black Lives Matter program because it was at a time where we'd had a black president for 2 terms. Everywhere you looked, in every profession at the top, were black people. And they're talking about black people being subjugated. Lunacy.
Oh, it is total lunacy. When I spoke at the CPAC on the weekend, and I told a story about this black British guy who was playing out in Australia, playing soccer, football, and he was arguing with me that because of the colour of my skin, I'm oppressed. And I said, that's nonsense. I said, then I made the joke, I said, I've got a house on the North Shore. I overlook Sydney Harbour. I've got, I own 2 businesses. I sit on corporate boards and that. And I said, gee, I'm going to love it when they stop oppressing me because I'm going to have enough money to buy Google and Twitter. No matter where you are in life, and that was one thing I loved about my father. It didn't matter if you're the midnight man, and a lot of people wouldn't understand that. That's when we had outdoor dunnies and the bloke would come around and collect the pans and clean them out and stuff like that. He saw them just as equal to a doctor or a policeman or anyone else because they were workers. Absolutely. And that was his attitude. Yeah.
And that's what I love about your attitude too. You have been an absolute pleasure and a delight, and I'm so thrilled we managed to do this, and I will look forward to further friendship and discussions because I think you're just as fabulous as you do.
Oh boy, I'm pretty tough bloke on myself. It's because I got very high standards. And that for myself,
yes.
My parents taught me that we're all God's children, and I must love and respect every person. And even if I disagree with them, I've still got to shake their hand and go to the pub and have a beer with them and whatever. Not to have anger and hatred to people. It's about how do we make our short time on the earth a better place for everyone.
Well, you've had a wonderful upbringing, you've had great influence, and I thank you for being a guest on Lily High on Life.
Thank you very much, and it was very much. Life is high. Have fun, and if you treat people decently, people will treat you decently, and it's a great world.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.